That's it.
I would like to call the budget meeting to order. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. All counselors and board are present.
Not all the budget committee.
Irene's realms.
Irene's on Zoom.
Irene's
Oh,
online.
Yep.
We don't have resolutions. Nope. Okay.
Unless you want to, you can fill in future out.
Okay, I open nomination for a budget. Yes, Mr. Levhart.
We have one person who's been on the budget committee for quite a while and has done it, Dave Holland. And also Beth Spell, secretary. If they're willing to do it.
You're nominating him as
No,
as
as
secretary.
chairman.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I'm the secretary, but you just want chairman right now.
Right.
Well, here's, I'll tell you, I'm not comfortable with the situation that we've been put in. In all the years I've been involved with council and the budget process. Never been unprepared coming into a budget meeting. And there's no way to possibly be prepared and, in my opinion, responsibly review this budget in the short amount of time that's probably gonna take place tonight. Haven't had a chance to read the budget message, haven't had a chance to review any of the budget issues.
I'll withdraw my motion.
I'm uncomfortable
Okay.
with even being here going through the budget
I agree. I tried to
I-
download it.
I
I could
object
not
to it.
download it.
wholeheartedly, so. And the fact that the public got copies of the budget online sooner than the budget committee got them is another objection. You posted it online at 5, didn't you?
Posted it online and sent you the link immediately after.
Mhm.
You got it at the same time it went live. Yeah, and that's the great thing. I mean, here's the thing. It's your first budget meeting. This is your budget orientation. It's me to deliver the message to you. It's to go over. We can start. You're gonna have a whole nother week, 2 weeks before our next meeting to give your thoughts, go over it with the questions for what we go over. This is orientation. This is your budget message and your review of the budget. So you don't really feel comfortable that you really don't need to have seen it before tonight. This is the orientation. So hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll be familiar with the budget. You'll have a good idea of what we're doing, what's being proposed and what you're looking at. Then you have 2 weeks and then you come back and we'll hit it with all questions, concerns, comments, and anything else you want to talk about. So, we just, the numbers and trying to get what we could together for you. It just was a crash course and this is what happened. So usually I like to have it out a week in advance. That didn't happen this time, but moving forward, it will happen. So I'm just excited we can present to you a pretty good budget and it's got some cool features and things in here that I'm excited about and I hope you're happy with it at the end of it. Tom?
I'd like to underscore what Dave said and his point about the budget being presented in such a short manner, and I appreciate what you're pointing out, and that's great. I'd like to point out that when I was on the budget committee 5 years ago, I filed a formal complaint against the former city manager because it was dropped on us in such a short term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Sherry, can I?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, maybe it might have been better to warn us to be checking our email that the budget would be coming, the link to because I got the message that said, you're gonna get it tomorrow, so I assumed that was now. And I didn't keep checking the email, so
Yeah.
Give us some hints.
The intent was to bring it and have it presented at the same time. There was some, I don't know a better way to say it, pressure to have it out beforehand and to get it out. So this afternoon, as soon as we were comfortable with it and had printed, I dropped it in. So,
There was a plan to, like, if we were supposed to all get it tonight at the same time. Okay. Do I have any other, nominations for the budget chair?
Sherry, could you clarify what the duties of the budget chair are? In the past, it's just been guiding.
Yeah,
us
just
through the
guiding them through the budget page by page.
Like
and-
Ron used to do.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
So it's not a huge.
No.
undertaking.
And I mean, doesn't matter. I just
You can
wanted
do
to
it.
give somebody else an opportunity if they wanted to.
I would love to see you do it.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion for Sherry to be the chairman of the budget committee for tonight or for the.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Anybody opposed?
So you're paid a big buck.
I know. Okay, so we all know who's on the council. We all know who's on the committee now. We are going to, has anybody had a chance to read the guide to the budget? Okay, this guide is intended to assist readers in finding information in the city's fiscal year 2024-25 annual budget book. The introduction to this section includes the budget message, the city's organization chart, and the demographical information. Policies and budget development, this section contain, well, you know what? We'll just go to the budget message first, and then we will move on to the other 3 points.
yes, and I don't think the intention is you have to read through the whole document word for word tonight.
No.
This is to guide you for the public when they pick it up, 6 months from now and I will say the reference section, we don't have that included. We have the ads and the affidavits and we will have the resolutions and the LB50s we'll attach at the end of the final document, so.
Okay, Melissa, would you like to talk about the
Budget message?
budget message?
Yeah, so, you are presented with your 2024-25 budget. It's in conformance with chapter 294 of the Oregon Revised Statutes, the ORSs. My goal this year was to make sure that, or hope that the public and the citizens, the staff, the city, see that we are working to provide increased levels of service and then building up our funds for the future. The wastewater treatment plant, as you all have been hearing updates, is moving. We are actually making strides. We have our engineering RFP out to do final design. And we're going to start taking steps to try to find and meet those gaps, those funding gaps, so we can get some funding in, hopefully not all loans. And so we can get the plant paid for. One of the most notable changes in the budget is we have taken a lot of those sub-departments that were within the funds and combined them into just the fund. Couple reasons for this. One is when you have a bunch of sub-departments, it makes coding and accounting, it becomes difficult. You almost have so much information that nothing gets coded the same twice. And that's where I think we're coming up with a lot of our discrepancies in coding, and especially when you had turnover in personnel. It makes it hard. And so you never know if you have like 2 professional services line items in 2 different funds, but they're kind of the same fund. Where do you put one and not the other? And so for a city the size of John Day of 1,900 people, you just have your, I don't know, is it 6 funds, 5 funds? You have all your line items in there. They're specific enough to get what you need to code and get your budget transparent and easily to be able to read and administrate. And so we did add. Well, anyway, user friendly, so we'll move on with that. We tried to project revenues and expenses as close to expected. My goal normally is to project low and expend high. But without a completed 22-23 audit, we've been very conservative. So we have a very tight budget. It's important to note we had, as the Urban Renewal Agency meeting, we just found out we have cash flow issues and we're working to correct that. We're gonna have to prioritize our spending in order to fulfill those obligations made by the URA. Personnel services, the city currently operates with 10 employees. This budget includes a 3% COLA for all employees and the addition of a full-time salaried finance recorder HR director. We're gonna try to get all three in one. We'll see how it works out. We have, as you know, a union, and so we are in our first, we are bargaining for our first contract. So we have a union attorney, and that is costing something. You'll see that in professional services across the board, raised line item. That will go down once our contract is completed, and we won't need that union attorney as much anymore. So their services will go way down unless we have an issue or a grievance that we have to work out. So in the future, though, with the next year's budget, there might be some contracted obligations that you'll see in those budgets moving forward, because once the contract is completed, we will have probably some additional personnel services that will need to contract that will raise some of those funds, those personnel services. So we are purchased and are implementing Cassell, which is a software company a lot of cities use. It's going to consolidate and automate our accounting and utility programs. Right now, they don't talk to each other, and it's very, very difficult, and it's very frustrating for our staff. So this will allow our users to access billing information, go paperless, create auto pay, take credit cards. And so we're very excited about that. Legal meetings, travel line items across the board have been increased in all the funds. We have the labor attorney, like I talked about. Or meetings and travel has been increased because we have the League of Oregon Cities Fall Conference this year in Bend. I think all the counselors should attend. Funds, I'm actually on the planning committee for that, so it'll be exciting. Funds are expected to be used for certificates for our public works and office personnel. They're going to need those, so we have budgeted for those for this year. General fund, the most notable item you'll see is the rollover from last year to this 24-25 is only a little over 12,000. That's kind of concerning. Revenues, we again budgeted conservatively, moderate increases for cost increase in use and what we saw in the past. We're going to close out the IT fund, which was the fiduciary pass-through for the Grant County Digital. And that is expected to be, that group is expected to be dissolved at the beginning by the end of this budget. We did anticipate, and this is just what we saw from council and the Grant County Digital boards, is we're anticipating the sale of the Seneca building and the John Day building that are both owned by the city. After the sale of those properties, looks like a little over 66,000 will be used will be left over in that IT fund, and we'll move that into general fund. It'll probably help pay for some attorney fees, professional services, the audits, and closeout. We have the 900,000 for the 1.8 million, the rest of the $1.8 million that John Day will take out to help subsidize the URA, which we just talked at length about. One of the most exciting, I think, line items we added this year is a public safety line item in the general fund, where we funded with $100,000 to we're going to start an IGA with the county and see if we can get a police officer dedicated to John Day for this next fiscal year. I anticipate for the following years, we'll just keep trying to add to that and get more coverage. So I'm excited about that. And so we'll start that with the county. We have the fire department, not much change there. We have the fire chief who's budgeted at 20%. They have the loan obligations of 42,000 to the water fund. It's 10 years. You can read about this. I won't go through every single loan that we have or obligation, but you please take note of that. There is quite a few. And so all the fire department fund, that is the only sub-department left. So we have the fire department, that is a sub-department of the general fund. And so the fire department, water, sewer, and streets, I believe, all contribute money to the motor pool fund. I'm suggesting that we talk about in the future eliminating the motor pool fund also. John Day doesn't, a size of 1900, we really don't need a motor pool fund. We don't have a full-time person working as a director, or fleet mechanic, or a fleet director. We could probably, our public works guys handle it. They could attribute their time to that, the individual vehicles within those departments, and it would work just fine. I'm suggesting that the county or the city and the rural fire district revisit the IGA and discuss how they can best serve the city and the Grant County rural district. Right now, the city is subsidizing the fire department. I feel at a greater rate than the rural is, and the rural gets the taxes and we don't. We're subsidizing it totally from the general fund. We get some taxes from the rural fire district, but I don't believe it's enough to satisfy the equal amounts that we put in. So it might be something in the future that the city wants to look at. The street fund operates on two revenue sources: highway use funds, and they're both restricted, and the Grant County forest receipts. The street fund completed several projects in the last couple of years. And although the fund is now balanced, it's partly due from large transfers from the last 2 years from the general fund of over 800,000, water fund 160,000, sewer fund 40,000. So over the last 2 years, over $1 million went into the street fund to help it balance. And so, and that was due mostly through some overcosts and some non-grant funded projects. So at this point, it's stable, and it has a contingency fund of 210,000. That's the other thing I tried to do throughout this budget, is put contingencies in where we could. That will strengthen those funds and also help with the future rollovers into the next budget year. The IT fund, as I stated before, we're closing it out. Debt service fund holds the local option tax from the fire hall building. There's nothing changing there. We just pay our bill every year. You'll see that the loan was in 2016, 655,000, 3.7% interest. The loan will be satisfied in 2030, and the remaining balance as of now is 299,000. The community development fund is usually subsidized by cities. Most cities do subsidize their community development fund. However, moving forward, in the future, we're going to need to discuss the greenhouses, what the city wants to do with those. Raising development fees. Right now, they're really, really low or non-existent. A lot of our fees, we don't even have fees for. And then hiring a full-time planner. Revenues include the 36,000 from the general fund and the $6 fee paid for residents on their utility bill, application fees, and transient room tax dollars. Our professional services line item includes the contract planner. We did make one change in this with the TRT dollars. I split them out. Statutorily, those are supposed to be split 70-30. In other words, you are only allowed to spend you can spend 100%, but at least at minimum, 70% of those TRT dollars have to be spent on tourism. And that's actually defined as an event or something that causes people from 50 miles away or further to come to your city. And so, you can use it on beautification projects, the flower baskets, a lot of towns use them on that. Anything to do with the pit stop, the bathrooms, public restrooms, we can use there. And then, I was just giving some examples and wayfinding signage. So 30% of the tourism dollars are 30% are non-restrictive. That means the city can use them any way they want. A lot of cities will stick that into the general fund. But, from the time I've been here, I have gotten a feeling that the council likes to give back to their community and fund some civic organizations or civic projects. And so I did do a line item for community civic community projects. And so that would be like your Hope for Paws, your FBLA, your sports teams, that kind of thing. So you'll have some dollars in there build up that you can use for those kind of when people come and give asks that you can give out of that line item. I noted the greenhouse debt. You have a 25-year loan from 2019 for $350,000, 3.43% interest. The loan term ends in 2043, and the balance is $295,647. And then we should have discussions on that. Motor pool, I touched on a little bit. It operates by transfers in from other funds. And again, in the future, you might want to decide to delete that fund. The unpaid comp fund, historically, the city used this fund to account for its compensation obligations when employees terminated. It's not necessarily required. And so to simplify our accounting, we're recommending it be discontinued and that the remaining balance be drawn down as qualifying events occurred. In other words, it's still there. It has some money in it. And so as employees terminate or leave, we will draw it out of that account. And then when it's zero, we'll delete it out and cancel it out and just use our personnel services cash flow. The water fund. It's our one fund that's doing well. So our water fund has, I think it's over $1 million. Yeah. So the only suggestion we have for this, and we didn't do it for this year, we might do it for next year, is probably as a city should have your SDCs recognized in a separate fund. And so in the future moving forward, we'll be putting the SDCs in their own fund with their own dollars separated out so you can tell what exactly is in there, since they are restricted and they do need to be monitored on how they're used. We had a rehab for wells 3 and 4 that was budgeted this year, this fiscal year. We rolled that over with a little bit more money so that we could get that project completed. We put a contingency in this fund of $150,000, and there is an unappropriated balance of $365,000, which will help with the city cash flow and help with the rollover next year. So that fund is doing well. Water fund has 2 outstanding debts. There's a consolidation loan and a Business Oregon loan. The sewer fund for all intent and purposes, 2 sewer funds. One was called a joint sewer fund and one was a sewer fund. They were being used, in the same manner. And so we combined them. We got rid of the joint sewer fund so that we could just use the sewer fund and make the accounting easier. We have the problem with the water is going to have to make a transfer to the sewer fund, which Rob will probably talk more about to balance it. We took, I believe my numbers are correct in here, right? We updated this.
332,000.
332,000 we needed to borrow from the water fund to make the sewer fund balance. The loan will have to be paid back at a rate of 5.2% interest over 10 years. Payments will be $43,000. There's the Washington Federal that the sewer lot has, that's part of that debt consolidation, and then, the priority I see for the city obviously rests largely in the sewer fund, or with the completion of the sewer plant. And so, as I said, we're gonna complete final design, procure the package plant, complete the utility rate study, and those are all funded through grants and loans at this moment. And then we do need to focus on acquiring additional funding to complete the sewer plant. And last, it's been a pleasure. Rob's been great. He's had me bothering him a lot for numbers, and staff's been great, citizens have been great. And so I'm just hoping that people will see this as a great move forward. And I think we're gonna do great in the future. I think our funds will be okay. It's just gonna be tight for a year or two. And that is all I have for the budget message. We threw an organizational chart in there. And then for a little light reading, I always put policies and budget development in my budget. So there's just kind of some budgetary guidelines that I use when I'm doing a budget. And then there's information on the budget process. There is your budget calendar. I like to have budget, FAQs. So if somebody off the street picks up your budget and has never seen one before, they can have a little bit of question and answers. And I will turn it over to Rob so he can get into the funds.
Oh, do you have any questions for Melissa?
One quick question, comment, I guess, on your combination of the joint sewer and the regular sewer fund. The joint sewer was specifically just treatment plant related.
Mhm.
The sewer is the collections that paid for the treatment plant.
Yeah.
I think largely one of the reasons that was separated out was because of Canyon City's contribution, 5% of the cost of the treatment plant. And so they paid a portion of that total cost of operating the treatment plant. So if you combine those two, then you lose that ability to show that this specifically what it costs to operate the treatment plant, electricity, maintenance, personnel, whatever. You lose that ability. And I guess my concern would be is that that causes an issue with contracting with Canyon City and not being able to show them actual expenditures on just the treatment plant itself.
Yeah, I think what was happening though, those numbers it wasn't operating the way it was intended. I think that when the employees are working or when the lights or the utilities getting billed, it wasn't being justified and it's not as easy to separate out as just in a budget and there's a line item. When you get the bills or when you have employees working, it doesn't work out on the ground the way it is on paper. And so it wasn't a good representation anyway. And I think when we get this rate study completed, it's going to say a lot more than our budget. I think that's where we're going to start discussion. I mean, we are building a treatment plant that's going to be in our budget. The rate study is going to tell us how much it's going to operate that. And I think we'll be moving forward with better numbers and better understanding. I don't think the budget and having those two funds combined is going to would solve the problem. I think it's not giving the answers that in real life that it was intended to, if that makes sense. Because if you have a utility bill, you don't know if it's in the treatment plant or the people that are treatment plant operators working on the ground, it just didn't work out. And so things were getting coded every which way and there's no consistency.
Well, I understand that's been going on for probably close to 2 years, and that's because of the people lacking the knowledge that we're taking care of that kind of stuff. But typically in the past, it was done correctly, and it was fairly accurate as to the separation between the two. So with personnel changes and training and stuff like that, you know, it has the potential to be accurate. I don't have a problem with it other than the Kansas City being, they pay us money based on what it costs.
Yeah.
And
we'll
so
get
as
those.
long as that can be worked out and it doesn't create a problem with Kansas City, you know, I don't necessarily have an issue with it. It was just a point I was.
Yeah. No, we'll have numbers for them and they'll be good numbers.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
I thought we were gonna put a line with the repairs and maintenance in my motor pool for my vehicles.
We didn't move your motor pool over this year. Is it under the same?
You're
motor
talking
pool?
Can we
in
wait
motor pool?
until we get to that page?
Well, it says fire motor pool and there's no repair or maintenance.
Um,
It's probably not-
Is Rob gonna go through each of them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so maybe
Can
when we get
we-
to that one, we can.
Yeah,
Yeah, we get to
Yeah.
that page.
you got a little bit of a wait.
It's right
The
here.
suspense is killing you, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Is it, it's in there.
It's in.
Yeah, it's in there.
okay. So,
Ready?
Rob, you want to start with page 21?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So to answer the question, on allocation and total. I had the opportunity to work with Julie Larson and Chantal, back on this job. We had some tremendous, very skilled staff, keeping track of everything. And so the numbers prior to about 2022 are pretty solid. When we look through this, and so as you see these columns here, starting on page 21, you've got 2022's audited. Also, those were almost exclusively done by Chantal in terms of actually recording the transaction. 23, I think there's going to be some changes when the audit comes along. I've not been directed to actually allocate any time to correcting any errors in 2023. 24, as I've said before, 24, as I've said before in council meetings, I've done July and August so far. So we're using numbers that they may not be perfect. And some of these don't match your general ledger because I adjusted them for what I think they need to be as I went through the budget. So I just want everybody to be on the same page on what that looks like. Also, this is your budget, not my budget. And so if you guys feel that there needs to be changes to these lines, let's have an open conversation about that. That's what we're here for. I'm not married to any of these numbers. They don't impact me when I put it. So, okay, let's get rolling here. So I'm pretty much gonna work through this column proposed by budget officer. Your 23-24 is what we believe this current year that we're in, which ends June 30th, 2024, will yield. 23, as I said before, is not audited, but it's probably a reasonable representation where those numbers are going to be. Okay, so that all said, let's go. So I'm going to kind of skim through till I hit one that I want to discuss. You can see that the vast majority of these are in line or with a small increase over the prior year. When we get to administration, that is from the URA. When we get to the back of the budget, you'll see the URA is included in here. It is for informational purposes. That is not part of your budget package because it is so integral to the operation of the city, especially with the loan flowing through the city. I just included it in there for informational purposes only. Okay, so administration, that is the fee from the URA. We're trying to keep the URA as lean as possible, so it went down from 7,000 to 5,000. We included grant revenue here. I'm skipping down lines and feel free to stop at any time. We can discuss this as we're here for. Grant revenue is the BTAP grant that we intend to apply for this year. You will also notice on page 23, there,
That-
The broadband.
Technical assistance
Thank you.
program.
Yep.
There is an offsetting 65,000 under capital outlay at the top of page 23. Okay, I'm gonna flip back. I just want you to be able to see that so you can see that this really has no impact on the budget. There's an in and there's an out.
Okay,
Here is the event we've all been waiting for. The Business Oregon loan is coming in to the general fund. Okay, because there is no repayment in the current period, we're recording it and we will receive it into the general fund this year. When it goes into repayment, because it is a general obligation loan, which means the full faith and credit of the city is backing that loan. It needs to go into its own brand new debt service fund. So that'll be next year's budget when that gets put in there. It's not required for this year because it'll, the only place he's actually shown the long-term debt actually shows on a financial statement is when you merge all of the general fund, or, governmental funds together. Debt service and general fund are both governmental funds. So that's why it's presented there. The rental income is from, it's new, it's from the Patterson Bridge property.
Did they accept that
Not yet.
still?
We get, by the end of this week, we're hoping. We will.
We did.
We're getting on the revised contract with the month.
Okay, good, thank you.
And then the IT fund, during the budget message, we informed you that the IT fund is expected to close. It's expected to have an additional $66,000 remaining profit, if you will, in the IT fund. And so that's being transferred to the general fund to close that out. That's where the 66,000 in resources comes from. As part of formatting, you will see every single revenue page in this document has the very bottom little summary. So you can see just quick and easy that the fund balances. And so you'll see the expenditures, and we'll go through these, but the little summaries on the page. And so the two departments that make up, used to be multiple departments, and bless you, multiple departments in every fund. They're now just, the only department that is specified out is fire. And it's possible that in the future, we may want to just break out fire in its own fund entirely instead of having it be department. It's entirely, council management. So we'll move on to page 22.
Are there any questions so far?
When do we get our new fire truck?
Chris? No. Not now. Okay,
Expenditures.
go ahead.
Okay. Wages and salaries contemplates the addition of, and they're broken out between all the funds. I have a breakout by FTE, if anybody wants to see just the positions and the percent allocated to each fund. That includes your new city manager and your new city recorder, my replacement. And then, yes, and then the associated employer paid benefit, PERS, which is health insurance, PERS, and yes, associated there. You'll notice that unpaid compensation has not been funded in the current year, and it's not projected to be funded in the budget for the reasons that the budget message was describing that Melissa shared. Moving on, down in materials and services, you're gonna see audit is in every fund is roughly twice of what we budgeted for 23-24. So we didn't get an audit this year. We need to have 2 next year. Now, I won't hold my breath to see if we actually get 2 done in the current year. We just know how this works. But we need to budget for it anyway.
Will we get an audit, slap on the hand by the state?
Oh, yeah, we've already got
Yeah.
that slap on the hand. Here's the deal, and I don't want to downplay the state,
I
but
know.
they have absolutely no power whatsoever. I love the state. I want to comply. I really do. In fact, the lady who's in charge of the program and I talk with relative frequency.
Thank
I
you.
want to keep her happy because
Yep.
she can make your life a little bit easier, but there's really no penalty to it. And we're doing the best we can. We've done nothing wrong. Okay. Public safety, we added the $100,000 for the budget message. Code enforcement and community promotion are moved to the community development fund. So you'll see those elsewhere. We're projecting dramatic decreases in legal and professional services. So those are 2 different line items. Legal goes from 125 projected current year down to 50. And then professional services, which is me and your administrator and your planner, go from 100,000 down to 40,000.
Just a quick question, Rob.
Yeah.
Public safety, that police officer would be full-time in John Day?
That's a great question. I think it's gonna depend on how the contract works out. However, I also do the accounting. I do this for Prairie City and they pay $100,000 to the county for 1 FTE officer.
Yeah, council will see that contract when it comes, so you'll see it before you approve it. It'll be an IGA, I'm sure.
And that's all public information. You can.
Just, can I ask the question?
Absolutely.
You said the professional services went from 100,000 to 40,000. Professional services were, in that category were what? That was,
Oh, that's me.
you,
That's gonna be your grant administrator, Nick Ducote. It's gonna be your planner. And there's
Planners and
probably,
community development.
okay, well, there's probably one or two other.
Yeah.
okay.
Basically,
So you
any-
kinda
any
have an
contract
idea.
staff.
Engineering that has to be done
Engineers,
through
yes.
general
Thank you.
fund. Yeah,
It'd be cheaper to hire people.
no, no.
Well,
I don't think you can get all those people for 40,000.
we move it from one place to another.
Eventually, it'd be nice. I'll work on that.
Computers and software, a couple lines down, we've got Cassell coming in, and that will increase our costs. Right now, they're comparatively low. I think, so this computers and software, there's some misclassifications in the current period, I can tell you that right now, because we didn't have to pay for our current software, because it's out of service. So we're just using that until it winds down when we get Cassell take over. So the costs will go up pretty quickly. What this computers and software is, I can tell you, is mostly, so there was a miscommunication when we found out there was a grant that was not being funded for the IT fund. Some of those costs that were assigned to the IT fund got moved to general because the concept was, well, it comes out of general fund if their grant isn't paying for it. So that's why it got coded there was a miscommunication. So anyway, that's, yeah, there's stuff like that. And then utilities, we used to have 10 different line items for utilities. We merged them into one. I'm not entirely sure you care exactly how much it costs for the trash. Or how much, what was the other account? The water and sewer.
Water.
I'm not sure. I'm sure.
Utilities,
I'm just trying to say,
lighting.
you know,
Sure.
the only thing you're losing is how much exactly it costs for electricity, how much exactly it costs to pay the city for its own water and sewer, things like that. I mean, that's what we rolled into it. So we're just trying to make it cleaner and more understandable. Moving on to 23.
I got a quick question before you move on. So what's the methodology? I was thinking about this from last year. You got wages and salaries at the top of personnel services.
Yeah.
Understand, administrative folks in City Hall are all paid for by the other departments.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they
there's-
contribute, every
Yeah.
department contributes some money to pay, cumulative pays for the full-time people in City Hall. So what's the methodology on what department pays and how much?
Isn't that a fantastic question?
It varies
Every city-
versus city, yeah.
Every city does it different.
And
Our
what-
city, it doesn't, it's pretty,
Yeah, we
Bizarre.
really, we do a lot in this city and have historically done this. And there's nothing wrong with it. I want to be really clear. Nobody's done anything wrong. But they do everything they can to keep the costs low in general fund and drive as much revenue into general fund as you possibly can. That's not a bad thing because general fund you can use to spend anywhere you want, whereas other funds, maybe you can't. And it's what you can justify. That's it. That's the point.
I've seen other cities that do like an administrative transfer
Yeah.
and they base that on a percentage of the budget.
Yeah, so let me address some of that. If you go back to page 21, I can show you where some of these revenues are coming in. If you look top three lines here under revenues admin, you've got payment in lieu of franchise water, payment in lieu of franchise sewer. So if you have a utility like you do, OTEC pays us quite a bit for their franchise fee. That's we're licensing them the right, you probably know this already, but we're licensing them the right to be able to be the sole provider for those services in this community. We're doing the same thing with water and sewer. Yeah, I think it's budgeted 5%. This was historically has been.
yeah.
We could even up it.
Other cities I've been involved in didn't charge themselves.
Yeah,
franchise
so franchise fees by law 5%, but you can negotiate a higher percentage, I believe.
fees. 7%, I think is the highest you can go right now.
Is it?
I
Okay.
think, don't hold me to that.
But anyway, ours are 5%.
Okay.
So that's where those come from.
Okay.
But again, there has to be mechanisms and John Day was actually somewhat forward thinking because a lot of cities are now playing catch up to go, oh crap, I have a deficit fund balance in general fund and my property taxes aren't gonna cover it. Right, what do I do? Well, historically, John Day's had pretty significant carryover balances in general fund. It's just this very recent period with high legal costs, lots of turnover in staff, that we don't have the same carryover.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so back to page 23.
We didn't buy any computer equipment last year.
No, we did not buy any computer equipment last year in the current year. We budgeted for it because we were
Yeah.
doing the Cassell upgrade, and that's why it was there. But we never did the Cassell upgrade.
We
We're
did.
just starting to do it.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it.
That's why we carried the 21,000 forward to the current year.
Okay.
And then you can see here under transfers for non-departmental, we are subsidizing, the general fund is subsidizing community development fund by $36,000. And then we have a loan to the URA, which is just an in and out. We have money coming in, and we're gonna pay it back to the URA to erase that deficit fund balance of 925,000. And then we are actually, with the current budget, we're able to put away 114,000 of operating contingency, which is fantastic.
So on operating contingency, what's kind of the industry standard for cities? How do you decide? I mean, I know it can be whatever you
Yeah.
want, but generally speaking, from a policy standpoint, what's the industry standard?
Well, I think so what that should simulate, when you do a contingency like that, you hope to not have to use it. You put it there so it's actually somewhat easy to access. But I'd like to see that back toward what your typical carryovers were back in like even 22 or 23, which is more like $400,000 or $500,000. I mean, that's where you should be, because you need to be able to take a shock, right? And general fund is where you want the largest contingency, but what we're gonna find is your largest contingencies are actually in water.
Right.
Which is fine too, but you can't use that, well,
As a loan, you
As a-
could.
it is frowned upon
Yeah.
to move water
Should not be
into other
moving
funds. Now you have utility ratepayers supporting other
Right.
governmental
Oh, yeah,
services.
Yeah.
Well, but it happens,
Oh, yeah.
and it's happening, so I'm just trying to. point that
Yeah,
out.
we should not be doing.
It's not a best practice.
So there's no set amount per se, for instance, like 90 days of operating capital.
Yeah, so that's total cash for the organization. You could apply the same thing to the government, to the general fund if you want. I mean, really, so when I said, what, 3 to 6 months is the
Mhm.
minimum of what you want in cash on hand.
Right.
You could apply the exact same thing to every fund and say, we want 3 to 6 months operating
Contingency.
cash contingency.
For 20, we did 20%, I believe, or
I just, I'm bringing this up to the budget committee because I think that from a fiscal policy standpoint, if we do set a target that's measurable, it's a measurable metric, and we can see it every year. It does a couple of things. One, it gives us a goal to shoot for. It gives staff guidance on how to prioritize budgeting every year. And then when you get to that, and you're, okay, say it's 6 months off. When every fund is at 6 months, 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, get to that. Then we know we got the green light to do the extracurricular stuff, right? The stuff that's really going to enhance the community, right? And we can remain fiscally responsible because we're not burning through our savings account to do things that we may or may not need today. If you follow what I'm saying, it's just a way to keep the city on a fiscally responsible platform, is to have a policy that says, hey, our goal is to be at 6 months operating capital in every fund. And that's the guidance. And if we can't do it this year, we're gonna work on it. And we're not gonna add a whole bunch of stuff in expenditures unless we feel like we can project that we can get there. So it's just a thought. If we had a running policy, and I'm not really sure, usually typically financial policies, staff creates recommendations and brings it to council and things like that. But the budget committee has a lot of influence on that in their recommendation. So, just something to think.
Yeah, we would add that to the kind of introductory section of the budget document and say, hey, this is the plan, and we want to be here until we get there. But then once you do that, then you can start setting up these reserve funds for
Right.
various things. And John Day, when I first got involved, years and years ago, they had reserve funds, right? Those have since gone. That's just not right or wrong. I'm not calling that out. I'm just saying that, right, it's moving away from that. Okay. Page 24, fire. This is a department of the general fund. Okay,
Negotiating a new contract with rural. I see it's quite a bit less than last year.
okay, so
Well, this
I'll
is-
address that. So there's a methodology
confusing.
for how this has been historically done. And I actually work with Anna, who does the books for the rural fire to get the right factor in there. Per the calculation that's been used, it uses a rolling 5-year average of calls. And then also there's kind of an estimate component and then a true up component to the rate. So essentially, per the calculation, we got overpaid for our share. And so we're essentially giving it back in 29. That's why it went from 45,000. So that's the difference. No change in methodology, just we got paid more than,
So that'll be normal from now on.
no,
No, it's,
there's a payback component in that. So it's reduced to pay back the overage.
Okay.
If you will. I think it's worth, the calculation is extremely complicated and, there's probably an easier way to work on a future contract with it. That'd be perhaps more consistent, so you don't get a fluctuation from, say, if you look in 22, it was only 22,000. And then in 23, it went to 42,000, and then it stayed stable for a period, and now it's back to 29. So, maybe a percent of tax revenues or something along those lines that's gonna stay somewhat consistent. I don't know. It'd just be whatever comes from negotiations.
With fire, maybe I will see it. Where's the equipment?
So that it has its own department in the motor pool. And
Is that
that's,
a motor pool?
yep,
well,
carryover, historical, this is how it's been done.
Really?
So, yeah,
yeah.
so it has its own department. in the
Turnouts
motor
and
pool.
oxygen and all that.
Oh, no,
Oh,
no,
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 that's in here.
that's in here.
That's fire supplies, operating supplies, safety.
Yeah, so you have a couple of areas that are catch-alls, if you will, for these types of things. So there's on here, we'll skip wages for a second. Repairs and maintenance is 10,000. Fire costs, which should be anything specific to fire, is 18,000. You have operating supplies, which is probably gonna be your turnouts, is 15,000.
So it's going down. We pretty good for supplies, Don?
Yeah, so Dawn had input on this.
Okay.
Okay, okay, so back up here on the revenue, we show grant expenditures of $95,000. Or I'm sorry, grant revenues of $95,000. At the very bottom of the page, you have grant expenditures of 100 because there's $5,000 match component in the grant. So that's where that lies. Wages and salaries is essentially unchanged. It's a portion of Don's salary. And I think we also allocate some of the city recorder time there as well. So that's what those are made up of. No change in methodology. I think that's it. Any questions on fire? Okay. Page 25. Yeah, fire department continued. So we left 5,000 in here, just consistent with prior year budget for buildings. We did take out the 8,500 for capital expenditures. Correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think that was with Don's blessing.
What was that?
We eliminated the 8,500 in capital
Seems
expenditures.
to be the 0.5 match for AFG.
No, that's on here under grant
Yeah, we just-
expenditures.
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, gosh, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
That's right. So in the prior year it was budgeted under capital expenditures. We moved it up into materials and services because that's a type of asset you would be buying with that. And then we kept the loan repayment of 42,992 is from when the water fund loaned the general fund. So there was a point where the general fund got really, really low. And it was due to the fire hall construction. And the water fund had money, so it loaned the general fund enough to bring the general fund back to flush. And the payment of that is right here, 42,992. So that's where it's coming out of. It's unchanged and will continue for a significant period of time. And then the transfer to motor pool funds is 25,000 going to the specific department in motor pool that is related to fire. That's what, in the budget message, Melissa was thinking, well, maybe you just eliminate that and put it in with the fire department. So you don't have to have a separate account in motor pool. But we didn't do that this year. We figured there was enough changes. All right, on to page 27, unless there are questions. Okay. Street fund. Street funds had a lot of activity over the last several years. A lot of capital projects were done out of the street fund. You can see at various times in 22, 23, there was actually a negative fund balance in there. These were covered with transfers from other funds. We have a transfer of 414,000 from the general fund in 22, 23, and then also this current year, we're at 254,000 in transfers. Water fund transferred 145 in 22, 23, and 17 this current year, and then sewer also contributed to some of that. Current year, so the beginning fund balance is back up to $399,000, which is great. That's where it should be. We don't feel like there's any need to supplement that or subsidize it anymore. So there aren't any transfers. Your gasoline taxes continued to go down. I think the current year targeted at 116 is probably pretty close to where it'll also end up next year. I'm actually concerned that maybe that's a little low because it dropped from 130 to 116. And so maybe there's some defined as I dig through the financials in there somewhere. So I left it at 116. I left Grant County Forest receipts at consistent with prior year as well. We do have 25,000 in grant expenditures in there, and I believe that's also related to the street repair on page 29. It's 25,000. The street repair is 30,000. Any questions on this page before we move on? Okay. On page 28, we budgeted salaries and wages. They're higher. So in these funds, in the general fund, everything's pretty much on a static allocation. So your salaried employees, your office staff, they all have a static allocation of how much time is charged to the general fund. However, your plant team, they charge based on where they actually work that day. And so you've got some variability here. And so we always, and you can see this reflected in the prior year, 22, 23, they only spent 88,000 in wages and budget was 151. In the current year, we're on pace for roughly what 22, 23 was. And so you budget too high in all of these water, sewer, and street because you don't know what percentage that, you might have a street project that takes them into street more, or on some years you don't, they're in water and not charging the street. So that's how you end up with these kind of variability in these funds. And so you can see it's a pretty significant number if you're comparing to the prior year, but if you look at prior year budget, it's actually slightly lower than prior year budget. Audit, we budgeted 2 years worth of audits in this fund. Insurance, we just have typical growth in insurance costs, which seems to go up every year. Business grants, those were the facade grants. Those are going away. We're not doing those anymore this year. Legal, we left similar to prior year, just to make sure we've got enough in there. And then professional services for the same reasons as general fund, we dropped that down a little bit. And it's really all that's, I think, really worth pointing out. Any questions on that page?
Street repair and maintenance.
Yeah.
We've got new streets, but we have old streets that are in pretty bad shape,
Sure.
and they really need to be addressed. I mean, seriously, it's really disgusting to go by some of our side streets that are potholes, the asphalt is gone.
Yeah.
We need to do more with our streets that we have.
Next meeting.
I don't disagree.
There's actually nothing in there.
There's
So if we want to do
nothing.
something.
Not
we
street.
can-
Yeah, and this
There's
is
less
where,
30,000. That's not
um,
much.
I know Counselor Bush has harped on, don't want to use the harp, but, has spoke on this often about, strategic planning and,
Yeah.
goal setting. And so in a normal year, I came here in January And a normal year budget starts about in December, through staff and internally. You also have a goal setting session as council, which would be typical before you go into budget, because you're setting goals for the following probably 1 to 2 years out, depending on how you decide to do your goal setting. And the priorities are set through that. So you start out, broad, and then your priorities are set out in the budget through the broad goals of the council. And so, that is definitely something to think about moving forward at this point. The issue with the street department, just now getting back to where it looks like we're okay without transferring in funds, has some contingency to help roll it over in the next year, provided we don't get a sinkhole or something drastically goes wrong where we gotta pull that out. Streets are always a weird, they're always one of those things that you never know. And so, I'm excited we're starting to get this fund healthy again. And then, yes, and to the point where those SCA funds could be used for that, and doing street projects. So
Yeah, I just feel like it's been neglected for so long. And they
don't
are in
disagree.
a total state of disarray.
Don't disagree.
Yeah,
Don't disagree.
it's something that really irks me, to
Yeah.
go down our side streets and have them looking like that. I mean, we want to attract new people. If they go down those streets, I mean, some of those houses are for sale. And, it looks bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
not just one street. I mean, we've got a lot of them that are
Yeah.
in very bad shape. I feel like, things have been neglected for quite a long time.
So we can put any amount of money up to 210 in a bucket, but without a plan, it doesn't do anybody any good. And so that would be.
And I can tell you right now that a street project's gonna be more than 210,000. And I will tell you my policy personally, if we're gonna do a street project, we're gonna do complete street, which means you're gonna look at the sewer, water, infrastructure underneath, you're gonna look, does it need sidewalks? ADA compliance is gonna be huge. So, if we're gonna do that, the priority would be to get a street plan in place, maybe with the help of, Casey, and start mapping our streets, which we may already have in a TSP, which I'm sure we have because it's sitting on my desk, but mapping out priorities of the street projects and streets, and you take one a year, you do the design and then you can do the project. But I certainly don't want any more cost overruns or surprises.
Right.
We're getting them with the ODOT project daily. And so I think Casey's probably had enough of that. And so when we do design a street, we want to make sure that we have counted for all possibilities in that way. The end result is a street that we can maintain and keep into for the future. So don't disagree, just we're gonna do this progressively.
Yeah, 13.5 is really just a couple of potholes.
Yeah,
I mean, that's-
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
Or the storm drains,
Yeah.
or other things like
Yeah.
that too.
And in the big, again, long-term, big picture, when you look at developments and building new subdivisions and things, it's been a long time since John Day's done all that stuff, from a historical standpoint. And so we need to take a look at how we adopt streets and the standards
Mhm.
and make sure that those streets that are built to the TSP standards, whatever that standard is. And that there's quality control and they're inspected properly, because if you don't do that, what happens is 5 years down the road, now all of a sudden you got, asphalt sloughing off, because maybe it wasn't done quite right. And so it's just important we have good processes in place to make sure we do a good quality job of adopting new streets. Yes.
Yeah, the biggest issues are short side streets, and they never were paved. The majority of them were never actually paved. They were gravel roads built on tailing river rocks. And eventually chip sealed. And then chip sealed again, and chip sealed again, and chip sealed again. So basically, it's a thin layer of numerous chip seals, and that's what the streets are made out of, by the majority of them, especially most of the side streets.
Yeah.
In order to do them right, besides, I agree with Melissa 100% on the infrastructure, and I finally got the city to start doing that. A couple of our last street projects, was at very minimum replacing the old sewer lines.
Yeah.
That were leaking and failing. Water lines were still in good shape, and most of them still are. But the sewer, definitely, especially the side sewers coming in from the properties. So between the utilities, and then you have to dig all that tailing out of there, bring in base, all that stuff before you can pave it. That doesn't even include sidewalks. It is very expensive, and that's why they're in the shape they are. I mean, we've tried to, over the years, the city's tried to take care of, put the most money in the most used main roads, the collector streets, the main thoroughfares. And a lot of the side one block roads, other than chip sealing them periodically every so many years, that's all we can afford to do. We don't have street revenue.
Yeah.
You get 250,000 in street revenue every year, and that barely is enough to chip seal, stuff, let alone repave it. That's just why you say it's neglected. It's not unnoticed. It's just not afforded. The city hasn't had the money to go through and do major street reconstruction through the whole town, especially the side, the little short side streets and stuff.
Can you speak on the parks and building maintenance? Seems like there's a considerable increase.
Yeah, so there, it was actually split out between numerous accounts. And so we,
Combination.
we consolidated all of them into parks and building maintenance. The 30,000 is probably actually more than we need for that. If you can see that, well, maybe that's not true, because if you look out, in 22, there's 58,000 there. And we did 21, it's actually been decreasing, but you have more, buildings, this year, that are gonna be, another year old, than you've had historically, and more parks as well. So that was the thinking on that is, well, we've got some variability in the numbers, so let's kind of meet them halfway. And, it's just a plan. No, fair enough.
I got a question on that same line.
Yeah.
Will that parks and building maintenance, will that be including, for example, bathrooms?
Yeah. So basically, anything that's owned by streets, if it's a building or a park, that would be. Yeah. All right, page 29, I'm just gonna point out the operating contingency, $210,000 is what we're putting in there for the operating contingency. Moving on to page 31, and I'm not trying to rush you, I just want to get out of here before midnight. So stop me. Stop me if we need to. Okay, IT fund. The only revenue that we have coming into IT fund is the sale of the John Day and Seneca building. We have no idea what we're gonna get for those. We don't have a contract in place, so we just guessed at 250. That's what that comes from. For both. That, you can notice that there's a negative net working capital of 159,000, and so that more than offsets that. If you flip to page 32, we just budgeted for some ongoing costs. We're not exactly sure how long we're gonna have to operate those buildings until they're sold. And then once they're sold, we would transfer the rest down at the bottom here to general, which is 66,586 was the plan. It could be a different number than that, and we'll just have to address that when we get there. Any questions on IT fund? Okay. Moving on. 34. Debt service fund is pretty much an in and out account. There's not much to do here. You've got the local option levy that pays for the fire hall debt. We have a bond, pay those, and we move on. We got an unappropriated ending fund balance, so we know what the amount of payment's gonna be, and we have a rough guess of what the local option levy is gonna be. Any questions on that? Okay, hey, we're making some progress, guys. All right, page 36. And this is your new and adjusted community development fund. So we start out with a negative net working capital of $21,000, sorry. And then we add in the transient room tax at 35,000. You got a transfer from general fund subsidizing it. We talked about that on the general fund side. And then we've got your economic development fee coming in, which is a fee charged on your water and sewer bills. We added planning application fees because we believe that we're gonna have more planning applications and track them better, I guess, in that account. Any questions on that page? Page 37. Okay, so we've got some time charged here. That's gonna mostly be your, that is going to be your city manager and your senior accounting clerk, city report. So that's what's in there. And then down here, we added advertising, even though we didn't have any current year, but we did reduce it from last year's budget. We doubled the prior year budget for audit. And we have code enforcement on here. We didn't add any dollars to it. And then the big addition here is 30% of TRT for community promotion and 70% for tourism. Tourism is the very last line here. And then we got, oh yeah, here's your planner on professional services. We went from 10,008 to 17. That 10,008 includes again my time and some grant administrator time. So those will be going down, but then you have the addition of the
Contract.
yeah, the contract planner. Any questions on that page? Okay, let's roll. On to page 38. Nothing else to add on page 38. Okay. Here's your motor pool fund, page 30 or page 40. Okay, so motor pool fund is funded, it's what we call an internal service fund. So its only revenues come from inside the organization. And it holds assets related to the other funds. The reason it was developed in the first place is just to make it a little easier to split out because a lot of trucks are used between water, sewer, and street. And so if you charge fees to water, sewer, and street, then you can control how much of the fund is paying for those vehicles, rather than having to split the individual expenses between the funds. Either method is fine, but that's why this was chosen in the past. And so you can see the transfers coming in from water at 45,000, from sewer at 75,000. Now, why sewer is 75,000? Because we eliminated in this budget the joint sewer fund, and it was paying 30,000. So you got 45 from sewer, 30 from joint sewer, and so that's where that 75 comes from. Street was contributing 40. So that's where those revenues come from. And there's supplementing this. You'll also see when we get to the fire department, it has its own revenue stream in there as well. But the fund balances are commingled. So the net working capital is, and this is the main reason why it may make sense at some point to have a fire specific fund that includes all vehicles and all operating fire costs. And then you can track that carryover balance from year to year, which currently the operating has no carryover balance because it's merged with the general fund, and motor pool has no carryover balance because it's merged with the motor pool fund. But when it was set up, I think the intent was to subsidize fire, and so you essentially bury it and you don't have to worry about it. It's just coming out, right? I mean, then it's not called out that, oh, we had to transfer 100,000 to cover the fire this year. So that's why it was devised that way, and it's very common. You see this all the time.
Well, we used to have police in there. Also.
Exactly. We did. Yep.
Casey, replacing your vehicles? You got a plan?
I hope so.
Okay.
Well, he's gonna like this budget, and of course, you guys may not, but we'll see. Melissa called me out on this one. This was all me. I'll take credit for this one. On the next slide. Page 41. She questioned me. How's that? Not call out. Okay, so you've got some labor allocated here. Same situation. We don't know how much time is gonna get charged to this, so we try to build in a buffer. That's why you get so much in salaries and wages in here. Now, because we don't want to be bringing it back to you every time somebody works an overtime hour. Okay, and then on materials and services, we've got what we think is a pretty solid estimate of what it's going to take on that. You can see it is an increase, but we also try to build in because we have no idea what your costs are going to be for an individual vehicle's repairs and maintenance. You can see the history on repairs and maintenance specifically, 14, 20, and then 14 in the current year. So we put 25 in there. Insurance is going up, and then fuel, we spent 15 or expect to spend 15 this year. We put 20 in next year. We're not sure what the growth in fuel costs are gonna do. Okay, and then the big item that I got questioned. Vehicle purchases. So, okay, what that is. Instead of putting, what is a motor pool fund for other than to purchase vehicles, right? So if you have excess in there and a vehicle is, it's determined that we need to replace the vehicle because they're gonna cost more than 25,000, which means it has to come to council anyway,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
So if you have your money in there available to spend for that, if you need it, that's my opinion. We could move that to contingency.
I can tell you around at 160, what's in there, 160?
166.
That's about a third of the used back.
Right. No, I get it. But I'm just
It
saying
can
that
be
if
your
you're,
savings account though,
yeah,
too.
that was the,
And that's typically what we
Yeah.
used to do in the past too. We
Yeah.
put it under vehicle equipment purchases in the capital outlay, anything extra.
Yeah.
I see that you removed all the
Vehicle.
vehicles.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
so one thing I didn't talk about at the beginning of this, when we do a budget, those individual line items are for clarity for you. But when we actually appropriate a budget, personnel services, materials and services, capital outlay are the only things that matter. And so when I present to the council, the budget, the budget to actuals, that's all you see. You don't see the individual account. So nobody knows if you spent 1,200 on small tools and equipment and, 2,800 on utilities. Nobody cares. In total, it's, it matters.
It's the bottom number that matters in the category.
So I kind of shortcut that because this one, we don't have anything specifically identified. If we had had equipment that was specifically identified, I would have put that amount in equipment, but this is just who knows, right? Okay, moving on. Everybody okay with that? Okay, all right, page 42. Rural fire district shares some of the insurance costs. That's where the 6,410 is, it's coming in. And then we transfer 25,000 from the fire department of general fund. And then you can see the costs associated. We actually had 22,000 insurance for the current year. And then we built in a pretty sizable increase for insurance for fire. Gas, we left it the same as last year's budget, and then same with miscellaneous and operating. The fire truck replacement. No, there isn't a repairs and maintenance on that. I thought it was in there. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Don.
That's what I was asking.
I get you. I get you. How much do you need in there? Now you're on the spot.
I had, I think it was 5,000.
Okay. Anybody have any problems with me putting 5,000 there and reducing vehicle purchase on page 41 by $5,000?
Nope.
Okay. We will do it. Sorry about that, Don. I thought I saw it on there. I have fire truck replacement of 28,000.
Yeah. My blood bolt.
It's kind of simple.
You're getting one soon. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other one drops to 161.
Yeah, so vehicles on the previous page, because this is all one fund,
Right.
it balances in total, and so I'm just gonna drop that to 160. That's okay. And then unpaid comp. Really, no activity in the current year. We've got a carryover balance of 138,959. And so we've budgeted all that under personnel services, which is the only thing we pay for out of this. We're not expecting that everybody leaves, so we have to pay 138,000 out, but we budgeted so we can expend what we need to. Out of that. Okay. Page 46. This is where all your money is. You have, I think, the total carryover is roughly $800,000 is what we're projecting you're gonna carry over from this year into next year. And your net working capital is 1.2 million. So it tells you you're offsetting it somewhere, right? So that's what we've got there. So essentially all your cash is in. water. We've got the transfer from fire for the loan payment of 42,000 coming in here. And then we just left the utility fees flat. I think when we get to sewer, I think you're ultimately gonna need to have a significant increase in rates. That's not for me to decide, or Melissa, they have a rate study to do that, but we didn't budget anything for that either, but we just left it flat. Okay, and then moving on to page 47. We still have a little excess in personnel services for water, though it's a little tighter because you don't have the same variability that you've seen in the other departments in there. You go 206, 246, and then 264. The next step seems to be 290. And so that's why we budgeted 290 in there. We have the same duplication for audit. Maintenance and repair is budgeted at 50,000. Even though historically it's been nowhere near there, but that's roughly what the prior year budget was.
I have a question on that one. Right?
Yes,
Is that going to include my water, chemicals and poly? Because I don't see
It's operating supplies.
operating supplies at 53,000 is what includes that.
15, I think I had 18 last year.
Well,
There
we
was a
merged,
couple, there was a couple line items we merged because they were all the same and coding was difficult.
yeah, you, we noticed consistent,
In there, water shut. And
it's all under operating supplies.
perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the intent, is to make this a whole heck of a lot easier on you.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Rob, on, third one on material services, black backflow testing, we don't do that, do we contract that?
That's a great
We do
question.
not contract that and we don't do it, as far as I know. There is somebody that does it that the city will point them to. They're very limited in their availability and I have a gut feeling that if we were to get questioned or called out on it, we probably would get in a little bit of trouble because we're pointing everybody to one specific contractor who only comes for like 2 weeks. And so if we're requiring this to be done and we only have a 2-week window to get everybody in and they have to go through this one specific person, I think, now I'm saying this out loud on a recording, we could get in trouble. We might want to look at, and this isn't the conversation for now, but internally with Casey would be something as we have our one-on-ones, it'd be something that we might want to look into in the future and how we do it and how we get things done. We just left a nominal amount in there just to see
Yeah.
if there's some setting up a program or
So
something.
Casey,
Well,
are any of your people certified?
He is certified, yes.
and so some of that cost coming out of that particular line item is for my recertification every 2 years, my recertification and cross connection every 2 years, and schooling to get those certifications renewed.
So
Well,
you
and
know
that would be
everybody in town that needs a backflow test,
Yes,
pretty much?
and there are 3 different outfits that do that. They've already, so 2 of the other outfits have already done. Because they're required to give the city a copy back for reports. I'm required to stay at the end of the year.
Did our letter only have one
Let
person
the-
though? That went out?
People want
The
to.
letter I got only had one person
I
it was
think this
referring
year we
to.
have one.
Right.
Because she's been doing all.
Right, so there'll be internal conversations about that, but again, your certificates can also come out of training, meetings and training, so you don't need to use that. But that's internal, so,
Basically, we didn't know how much it was gonna cost, so we just kind of kept it
Yeah.
the same as prior year.
I think it always catches people off guard. What? I gotta have it tested every year.
For sure.
should have kept my mouth shut when the office.
Right, any other questions on this page for me? Okay. 48. Okay, so we talked about some of this, so we left the computers in there. So we left the computers in there to purchase related to
Cassell.
Cassell, thank you. And there's also, I think, we're thinking computer equipment in there too, because I think we have to wire the guy's shop a little better.
Yeah,
or
we have to
something
get
like
the
that.
shop to talk to us.
'Cause there's some time card stuff will be great, things like that, increase productivity. So the water meter replacement, we carried over, we had 35,000 budgeted. We carried over the difference between the 35,000 last year's budget and the 18 that was actually spent, and then added 35 to that to get the current, because Casey, is having some issues having to replace some of those
Yeah.
water meters.
Yeah.
So just want to make sure there's enough dollars in there. Water system improvements, we left at 100,000 in the budget, and then well rehab is a carryover, plus an inflation adjustment from last year. Okay, transfer the motor pool fund, 45,000 consistent with prior year. Okay, and then the loan to the sewer. So we have to float sewer. Sewer's got a negative fund balance, and so we have to float it. My recommendation should this budget be adopted is that city council put in place an agreement, an actual formal agreement between water and sewer governing that, right?
Yep.
So you have loan repayment terms. We talked about that, I think, in the budget message. The 5.2% that it's based on is the LGIP rate right now, which is what you would get otherwise if you had invested. So that's why. That's what it comes from. We've got operating contingency of 150, and then this one has enough cash in it that we have an unappropriated ending fund balance of $377,000. And then you can see the debt service that's associated with this fund right here. So, any questions on this page? Okay, moving on. Page 50, sewer. So sewer got a ton of grant money back in 22 and 23. And I think council's been involved in some of these cost overruns. So there's been a few cost overruns that caused us to just expend more than we got in. That's how you get a deficit fund balance, right? And so the carryover balance from this year to next year is a negative 371,000. And the carryover, the positive carryover 245 is actually somewhat of a misnomer, because there were some grant monies that were received as revenue in 22-23, that 848,000 that weren't actually expended until the current year, and then we had cost overruns. So realistically, and this is somewhat complicated to describe, but realistically, that positive 245, when you get the audit report, is probably actually negative, because those will get reserved until you actually expend the funds. So that's why you have a 371 negative balance. It doesn't matter. It'll all get corrected with the audit. Okay. So then down here, we have several projects. This is where all your stuff's going on. I think everybody knows that. You've got two grants, CDBG and the Business Oregon loan. Those are for your sewer plant. And that is on page 52, totaling a $4.2 million project. So they just directly offset. And then sandwiched in between there is the purple pipe for the OWRD grant. And that is also on that page 52, 2.69 million. Loan proceeds from water, we just talked about that in the water side, so that's what comes in on the sewer side. And then when we close out a fund, it has residual equity, just like we had with the Fund 7, which is the IT fund. That was going to the general fund. In this case, when we close joint sewer, that will transfer, the remaining fund balance will transfer back into sewer. So that's where the 164,000 comes from. Okay, and then moving into page 51, unless there's any questions on page 50. Okay, page 51. And so you'll see a dramatic increase in personnel services. Well, we've combined the personnel services from the plant as well as regular operating sewer. And so that's what you're seeing in there. Down below that, you've got your audit. Significantly higher than the prior year, and so all of these compare numbers are going to be way higher, because you have the plant being brought in here to the joint sewer fund. So we're budgeting for both the expenditures that would have been otherwise included in the joint sewer fund and what is included in the sewer operating fund. So that's why you have this massive variance between estimated current year and future. For reference, if you want it, on the very last page of this document, the last two, you have your joint sewer fund comparables, and this is the joint sewer fund. So you can see what was actually expended current year in the joint sewer fund and what's projected to close out in the current year. So that's all there if you want to go back and compare. But anyway, suffice it to say, we've built in a combination of the two. We've also done some of the consolidating of this account that we did in water. We still have some separate line items for sewer chemicals, and then lift station, things like that.
Did we have an auditor in place last year?
Yeah, me. Can't audit what I do.
I
So
don't
when yeah, so when you hired me, so I did 22.
Right.
And then I started 23. Actually did some field work, and then that's when, it was, you guys needed somebody, and so, the mayor at the time called me.
Okay.
But we do, I think, we have a proposal that needs to be accepted, or was it already accepted?
No, we have to get a contract. We have to let them know, yeah.
The council approved it.
Oh, yeah. it's-
Okay, it's perfect.
Yeah.
So we have an auditor
Yeah.
essentially signed it.
So can I ask the question I neglected to ask during the revenue portion? Do we have a contract with Canyon City that they're gonna pay this amount, or is it just an estimate?
They, there's some history that I wasn't here for. And so there was an amount, like 6,400 that they were paying, and then it got raised to 10,000. And then I came in, and I don't know, I think they'd been paying that for a little bit, but then I came in, and somewhere between, when I came in and between, staff turnover, we hadn't been billing them. And then when we went to bill them, they had made a motion that they were not gonna pay the 10,000 and go back to the original 6,400. So they have been paying the 6,400. Again, until we get the rate study, because part of that rate study scope of work is going to be figuring out their portion of this project. And, just like they're gonna analyze and see what our citizens should be paying, they're gonna do the same thing for Canyon City.
Okay, so
And
right
so,
now, it's not.
Right now, they're paying 6,400 of
But
it.
that's not a contracted amount, that's just what they said they're gonna pay.
I think it wasn't.
I don't know if the
The
10,000,
contract expired, didn't it?
Yeah,
so they don't have a contract apparently. They're paying without one.
Dave, don't we have a usage meter between John Day and
Yes,
Canyon
they
City?
do.
That's usually what it was based on.
They have that.
Yeah.
And there's some dispute about the percentage.
They got
That's-
some
that's where
I
this
and
rate's
I
coming
too, right? There's a pipe that's not good, that actually a priority should be.
What was the
Working with
decision
them.
to go to 10,000?
I don't know. I'm sure there was calculations done. And so, again, I think it's just buying time until we can get a third party that says, this is what you owe. And I think that will make both sides happy. Because I don't know that coming up with an answer or a calculation is gonna make their side happy at all. They want to know. So, and to their point, they have their own system they have to take care of. So when they're billing their citizens, so when the citizens of John Day get billed, it's for Casey and the guys and the work and the plant and the effluent and flushing your toilet. They have their own system. We just take their effluent and process it. So when they bill their customers, they're billing for them fixing their pipes and maintaining their pipes and everything. So it's not the same as I want to say full meal bill that we get. I mean, we're just taking their effluent. So the cost associated with that and then the plant upgrade has to be taken into consideration because they also bill their own customers for maintaining and processing their. So
right now, they're not paying anything.
no, they're paying 6,400 and something a
Yeah,
month.
paying 64.
They
Yeah,
have no contract with them.
no,
But what happens if it comes back that it's, their portion is 85 and they've been paying 64?
they're gonna pay.
So, or
Yeah, they're gonna pay the new amount, whatever it is that they're entitled to pay. They know, I don't think anyone over in Canyon City, and I've talked to the mayor, I don't think anyone's under the assumption that it's gonna lessen. But I think they just want real costs. And real calculations done by an expert or a third party. That's
And that's what this rate study is.
that's what this rate study will do.
We used to have a committee that would set here John Day, and go to Canyon City and vice versa, and they would talk, be
Mhm.
transparent.
Thank you.
All right. So we're still on 51. Yeah, so a couple of items that are budgeted in here, like, you got the increase in insurance, pretty significant, and then computers and software that we've got our share for Casella. Why can't I not remember the name? And then we've also got our sewer chemicals reporting in it as well. So then the payment in lieu of franchise fee, there was a portion coming out of the plant fund as well, and so that's added in here. That's right. Any questions on that?
Just real quickly,
Yeah.
the increase on insurance, looks like it's about double.
Yeah,
Double
so
from the
plant was paying,
last tax.
plant was paying insurance too. Plant insurance in the prior year was $9,100. So if you take 91 plus the 98 that we paid there, that's $18,000, almost $19,000. And so you just put a small inflation factor on it and get the 23.
Okay.
Utilities went up 4 times.
Yeah, because plant uses a lot of utilities.
Because you combine.
Historically, it has.
Right, Gotcha.
That's the hard part. So remember, this is just the compare group for estimated current year is only sewer fund. If you want to see what we spent in joint sewer, you've got to go to page 58.
Okay.
And the two are combined in the current.
To make the 20. Gotcha, okay.
Sorry, guys, I try not to make things confusing like that. I apologize.
I got a question, case with the age of some of the lift stations and trouble you've had with pumps over the last couple of years is 6,000 enough in lift station repair and maintenance?
I think for the repair and maintenance is because I put in the capital outlay, I put 40,000 in for having resiliency in the county yard lift station as well as the Bowling Alley lift station, so I put that in there, but for 2 new pumps. So we have 2 new pumps in each station.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, page 52. Actually, Casey just stole my thunder, so yeah, you got your $40,000 in sewer system improvements is what he described. You got your transfer motor pool of $75,000 we talked about earlier. And then we were actually able to have a small operating contingency of $30,000 left in sewer to try and rebuild that. Okay. Then your debt service. Any questions on that? Okay, so we're actually through the budget for the city, and then just kind of a sneak peek at the URA. We're not asking for. Okay, no more using my hands to describe things apparently. So just to kind of show everybody the URA, and so you can see the elements here with that carryover negative 819. So that's where that 925 comes in, and you can see that the city of John Day loan, so the city is loaning 925,000 to the URA. Really, the payments are coming out of your property taxes. And they are pledged in the agreement between the city, because it exists as the agreement between the URA and the city, that they're pledged to pay for that. They're pledged to the city. So that's how that all works. It's just complicated. So that's why.
819 is what we have right now, we have to pay for.
More than that.
So what that negative 819 is cash that was used in that pooled city account. We paid for the URA with no reimbursement. And so the city is out $819,000 right now. That is different. I just want to clarify, that's different than the money we borrowed from business. Board. Okay. What I've got. Fully expect that there will be comments as you have an opportunity to read through it. Now we've been able to present it to you, and so feel free to shoot questions in between to Melissa or myself, and hopefully we can answer them and be prepared for the next meeting when we'll actually do something. This is the fun meeting, right? You just get a look at.
So is your email on the list of the people that notices?
Oh, undoubtedly not mine.
No, I kind of guard him because he's our consultant. And if he talks to you, he charges the city money. So we try to go through, if you can email me, if I can't answer the question, we'll have a conversation. Or if it's a really good question, we should save, ask us and then we can save it up and answer it to the whole group too.
Yeah.
Just be prepared. If we can be prepared a little bit, then that helps because,
Absolutely. Well, 'cause we can come in with a better product in the next meeting,
Yeah.
if that's the case, and so we
Right.
can discuss those.
So I didn't see where the EDA grant money revenue was in the budget. Is it in there and I just didn't see it or?
I don't think we have any EDA money in the grant, in the, what fund would that be? What is it for?
Well, it would have,
that would have
it
been,
would have been in the IT fund, but if we're gonna close the IT fund out, it would.
I
come
think it's a
into-
John Day grant.
It is a John Day.
Yeah, so it's not IT. So good, that is a good question.
Do we need a
That's
budget
really
for
good.
it?
That's really good.
Yeah, and so,
We do,
we do need a
we
budget.
do need a budget. for
And
that.
it's gonna be about 1.8 million, but it's an in and out, it's like the other grants. It'll be.
Yeah.
It's been spent though, so we need, we'll talk to Nick
What's
because
the out?
Hmm,
What's the out?
it'll be the broadband project.
So we still have,
Yeah, so just real
Yeah.
quickly there,
and it's the-
we're talking about selling the building, which is just a proposal at this point. It hasn't, no
Yeah,
decisions
no
been made.
decision.
But that'll be something that'll be presented to the council here shortly. And then, but for planning purposes for the budget, we's right now, the council's going to make a decision on this as well. Are we gonna move forward with the broadband project? And so we need to talk about that and the council needs to talk about that. And make a decision on that. For purposes of budget planning, we can make an assumption. We're gonna move forward with it, put it in the budget. Council can then make whatever the decision they want. And if we don't get the money, we don't spend it. Because it's in. But there is a $216,000 match requirement.
Yeah.
And that needs to be addressed as well. If we move forward, we're gonna have to pay that match somehow. Get that satisfied. Yeah.
so it seems to me that we could leave it in the IT fund and not dissolve the IT fund this year. Grant County Digital is separate from the IT fund.
Yeah.
But the EDA is this John Day grant.
I
Yeah,
understand.
but- yeah.
You can dissolve Grant County
I see what
Digital,
you're saying.
keep your,
Yeah.
your.
Yeah.
IT fund.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's,
We have a
It-
grant line item.
the IT fund was set up, my understanding is it was set up primarily for Grant County Digital. For the in and out money for Grant County Digital, John Day being the lead agency and the fiduciary.
So it got set up before Grant County Digital was set up.
I don't know the exact timing. I think it was, I wasn't around then,
Okay.
but I think it was probably pretty close.
We have a grant line item though. We'll just-
Right, yeah,
we can
yeah,
throw
but
money
the
in it.
problem is
It'll be
the
nothing,
match.
yeah. The match,
We
yeah.
don't have 280,000, but
And that's frankly, that's
Yeah.
something.
So then you're gonna wind up with IT still in a negative. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
still Take the building.
I mean, we got, in theory, if we take all our assumptions, which are, assumptions are tricky, that we're gonna have a $66,000 net working capital in the IT fund. Okay, well, maybe you're now down to about 150,000 that you need for the match, maybe.
right.
And just depending on how that looks, because, the city's having some significant expenditures in dealing with Grant County Digital that have been captured. Yeah. So we got to work through
It's a
that.
good one. We'll think about it. We'll talk to Nick.
So we could do a loan out of water to the IT fund to cover it.
Yeah, so I think there's options, but wouldn't that be?
I'm just,
Yeah.
I gotta balance the budget.
Yeah.
That's where my mind's going.
Yeah.
That grant is out there.
So, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, no,
I think it's fair to
True.
put it in the budget as a plan,
Yeah.
because the grant is out there right now.
No, it is. We have a
And,
budget.
and then
It's a good call.
ultimately, the council's just gonna have to decide. So,
Yeah.
So we meet again when?
Paying us interest payments on the loan or
Route,
because they didn't complete the
Yeah, I
project
think
on
it's
time.
for,
Yes, June 4th.
it's there is some executive session.
At 6:30.
6:30, yeah.
Okay, because when we took our notes last week, we said
But,
6, and so I just.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
talk to me.
So are we adjourned, or do we have to adjourn, or how does that work?
okay.
Mhm.
Well, if nobody else has any comments or
In our
questions,
last budget meeting last year, these were in all our packets. It's awesome information. Maybe I
Yeah.
can leave this with Melissa. It's,
We
We have them, yeah.
okay. And it's
We
just
almost
really,
included
really
them.
simple.
literally,
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
We really did almost.
We talked about it.
We
Okay.
talked about it.
This is why we're small.
okay, so if there's nothing else, I adjourn the meeting. Done. Good job.